Before we go any further, there is something you need to understand. You did not just land here by accident. It may feel like you simply clicked on a video or stumbled across a message while scrolling, but there is something different about this moment, something quieter, something deeper. It is as if this message reached you at a time when your attention was already searching for it, even if you were not fully aware of that search. And right now, in this exact moment, as these words enter your mind, it is not just about timing or chance. It is also about what has been building inside you for a while. Beneath the noise of your daily life, beneath the pressure, the routines, the constant mental load, there has been something forming in silence, a feeling you could not fully explain, not loud enough to call it a thought, not sharp enough to call it a decision, but still present. You felt it when you saw the beginning of this message. Not excitement, not simple curiosity, something slower, something heavier, like recognition without explanation, as if a part of you already knew what this was before your mind tried to label it. And that is not nothing. That matters more than you think, because lately you have been carrying something inside you that does not show on the outside. It is not visible in photos. It is not obvious in conversation. People around you may not notice it at all, but you feel it, quietly, consistently. It sits behind your thoughts, between your breaths, in the pauses when everything else goes silent. And you have gotten used to it being there, so used to it that some days you almost forget it is even there, almost, but not completely. You notice it in the early hours when the day has not fully started and your mind is already awake before your body is ready. You notice it in the small gaps between tasks, when there is nothing demanding your attention and suddenly you are left alone with yourself again. You notice it when someone casually asks how you are doing and you answer quickly, maybe even automatically, saying you are fine. Because how do you explain something that does not fit into a single sentence? The truth is more layered than that, more complicated, and deep down you already know that. What you are actually feeling is not weakness, it is not failure, it is not something broken inside you, it is exhaustion, but not the kind that sleep alone fixes. It is the kind that builds up when you have been holding too much for too long without enough space to fully put it down. And yet even with that weight, you have still been moving, quietly, in ways no one really sees. The moments you stopped yourself from reacting impulsively, the times you chose patience when frustration would have been easier, the nights you stayed with your own thoughts instead of escaping them, the mornings you got up even when everything in you wanted to pause life for a while. These are not small things. They are not invisible in the way they feel. They are proof of endurance, even if no one ever says it out loud. And if you are still here, still listening, still reading, there is something in you that has not given up on understanding yourself a little more. Stay with this for a moment, because what comes next may land closer than you expect. There is a part of you that has been holding on to a version of life that still feels unfinished. Not in a dramatic way, not as constant obsession, but as something quiet in the background of your mind. A picture that returns in moments of silence. A scenario where things finally make sense, where something that has felt unclear or unresolved becomes settled at last. And recently you may have started questioning that inner picture, not because you stopped caring, but because carrying it for so long has started to feel heavy in a different way. You might even wonder if hoping for it is helping you or hurting you. If holding on is strength or if letting go would bring relief. And those questions do not come from confusion alone. They come from tiredness, from experience, from living through enough moments to know that not everything unfolds the way we first imagine. But here is what is important right now. The fact that you are questioning it does not mean you were wrong to feel it in the first place. It simply means you are becoming more aware of yourself, more aware of what you can hold and what you can no longer carry in the same way. And somewhere in all of this, something inside you is still trying to move forward, even if slowly, even if uncertainly. Not because everything is solved, but because you are still here, still thinking, still feeling, still becoming. And before this moment ends, just remember this one thing clearly. Not every silence means nothing is happening. Sometimes silence is where change begins first. If this reached you in a way you did not expect, you might want to hear what comes next. Strong or simply afraid to let go? And that question is exactly why this message reached you today. Because the answer is not one extreme or the other. It is not foolishness. It is not pure wisdom. It is something more exact than both of those labels. What you are carrying right now is something like awareness still forming. You are learning the gap between hope that helps you grow and attachment that slowly takes pieces of you in return. And that is not a small lesson. It is one of the deepest shifts a person can go through. It never arrives cleanly. It never feels fully clear in the moment. It comes in phases. First confusion, then doubt, then moments where everything feels like a mistake, and then small flashes of clarity that disappear almost as soon as they arrive. And in the middle of all that, you are still here, still thinking, still trying to understand yourself a little more than before. That matters more than you are giving it credit for. From the inside, this process never feels like progress. It feels like being paused in motion, like standing in a space where you cannot fully return to who you were, but you also cannot fully step into what comes next. The past still feels familiar, even when it no longer fits you. And the future feels real, but not yet reachable. So you stay in that narrow space between the two. The doorway that does not feel like home in either direction. And it gets tiring, not because you are doing something wrong, but because holding that tension is heavy. Still, even in that discomfort, you keep showing up in your own life. You keep choosing forward motion in small ways that no one really notices, and that quiet effort is not invisible, even if it feels like it is. Every day you are balancing two versions of yourself. One version remembers what used to feel safe, even if it was limiting. The other version is slowly learning something new, even if it feels uncertain and unstable. And neither side fully lets go. That is why it feels like internal pressure. Not because you are broken, but because something inside you is reorganizing itself. Old patterns, old assumptions, old emotional habits are starting to loosen their grip. And when that happens, it does not feel peaceful at first. It feels like uncertainty. It feels like standing still while life keeps moving around you. It can even feel like nothing is changing at all, even though everything inside you is shifting at the same time. And this is where many people misunderstand their own process. They think change should feel obvious, clear, linear. But real change is often invisible while it is happening. From the outside, you still appear the same. You still do your responsibilities. You still respond to messages. You still move through your days. But internally, something much deeper is taking shape. You are questioning what you once accepted without thinking. You are noticing patterns you used to ignore. You are starting to see the difference between what you needed and what you settled for. And that awareness does not arrive loudly. It builds slowly, almost quietly, until one day you realize you cannot unsee it anymore. Stay with this for a moment, because this is where most people start to feel confused about themselves. There is a space you are in right now that is difficult to explain but very real to experience. It is the space where you are no longer the version of yourself that accepted everything without question, but you are also not yet fully grounded in the version of you that trusts what comes next, so you live between those two states. And living there can feel like uncertainty, like delay, like being held in place. But it is not a mistake. It is not a punishment. It is not life ignoring you. It is a transition that requires patience you did not know you would need. From the outside, nothing dramatic seems to be happening. Life looks normal. You wake up, you go through your routines, You handle what needs to be handled. But inside, something far more complex is unfolding. You are re-evaluating what connection means to you, what love feels like, what effort should cost you emotionally, what you are willing to carry, and what you can no longer keep holding in silence. And that kind of inner shift does not announce itself. It does not ask for permission. It simply happens while you continue living your daily life. And maybe that is why it feels confusing, because everything looks normal, but you feel different inside. And before you move on from this moment, remember this clearly. Not every pause is emptiness. Some pauses are where your next version quietly begins to take shape. And if this is resonating even slightly, you might not want to miss what comes next, because you had grown used to holding it for so long. And now something inside you is starting to question it in a deeper way. What am I still carrying that was never meant to stay this long? What responsibilities have quietly become my burden without me noticing? What parts of me have been waiting in silence for the chance to exist freely without guilt or hesitation? That inner reordering is not loud. It does not announce itself. It does not ask for attention, but it is happening right now inside you, step by step, in ways you may only understand much later. And there is something almost sacred about that process, even if it feels confusing while you are inside it. Because not everything meaningful feels clear in the moment it begins. Now, there is someone else involved in this story, the person who has stayed in your thoughts longer than you expected, the one whose presence still appears in unexpected moments without warning, not always as a memory you invite, but as something that arrives on its own. It can be in the middle of a normal day, a sound, a place, a certain light in the room, or even a random phrase someone says. And suddenly, they are there again in your mind, not fully, not clearly, but enough to be felt. I want to speak about them because they are part of what you are going through, not the center of it. You are still the center, but they are connected to the experience in ways that are not always obvious at first. And what I say next may not be easy, especially if the emotions are still fresh, especially if silence still feels heavy, especially if unanswered questions still sit with you. They are also going through something of their own. A process that does not look simple from the inside, a process they may not even fully recognize yet. Something shifting beneath their surface, even if they do not have the words for it, because under the version of them that people see, there is another layer, a quieter layer, one that is dealing with distance between who they have been and who they are slowly becoming. That gap is not easy to deal with. It does not close quickly. It does not disappear through distraction or staying busy or pretending things are different. It only shifts when a person is forced to look inward honestly, even when it is uncomfortable. And that kind of inner confrontation is not gentle. It is not simple. It does not follow a clean timeline. It unfolds in moments, in realizations that come slowly, sometimes painfully. And during that process, people often look the same on the outside while everything inside them is being questioned. But I need you to hear this clearly. This is not about you waiting. This is not about your life pausing. This is not about your healing depending on what they realize or do next. None of that is what this is about. What matters is understanding that what you experienced with them was real. The connection, the presence, the depth you brought into that space did not disappear just because things changed. It does not vanish. It leaves an imprint. And that imprint often becomes something people carry quietly, even if they do not show it. And here is what is important for you right now. The version of you that is slowly becoming more whole, more aware, more grounded in yourself, is not waiting for anyone to complete her story. She is building something inside her that does not depend on someone else's timing or clarity. And that version of you is not less lovable because she is in progress. In fact, she is closer to the kind of love that does not create confusion or shrinking or self-doubt. The kind of love that does not ask you to reduce yourself just to be accepted. The kind of love that does not require silence where you should be able to speak. The kind of love that does not make you question your own worth just to maintain connection. That kind of love can only meet you when you are no longer abandoning yourself in the process of trying to be understood, and you are already moving in that direction, even if it feels slow, even if it feels invisible. The moments before change rarely feel like change at all. They often feel like delay, like nothing is happening, like you are stuck in the same place emotionally while life continues around you. But what feels like stillness is often preparation. What feels like confusion is often restructuring. And what feels like emotional exhaustion is often the cost of releasing something you carried for too long. Stay with this for a moment, because this is important. Nothing meaningful in your inner world happens without tension first. There is always a phase where everything feels uncertain before clarity begins to form. And during that phase, it is easy to assume something is wrong. But often, nothing is wrong. Something is just changing shape inside you. And even if you cannot see it yet, that change is real. And if this is landing somewhere inside you, you might want to hear what comes next. And continue. The things you did in silence still mattered. The choices you made when nobody was watching still carried weight. When there was no applause, no validation, no outside confirmation, only your own quiet effort to keep yourself aligned with what felt right. Those moments were not empty. They were not wasted. They were shaping something underneath the surface, something steady, something real, something that is still forming even now. And you may not be able to see it yet, but that does not mean it is not there. Because real change often takes time before it becomes visible. It builds in layers long before it ever shows itself on the outside. And there is something else I need to say about the person who has been on your mind. I want to say this gently because it can easily be misunderstood if you hear it through emotion instead of clarity. They are being shaped by your absence in ways they may not fully recognize. Not in loud or obvious ways, not in dramatic statements or sudden realizations, but in quiet ways that happen beneath awareness. The kind of change that does not announce itself. The kind that slowly shifts how a person sees their own life when things are no longer the same. The version of you they remember is not fixed in place. It continues to exist inside their memory, and that memory continues to interact with who they are becoming. It does not shout. It does not demand anything, but it stays present in the background, and sometimes that presence turns into reflection. Questions begin to form without intention. What am I building right now? Is this truly what I want? Or am I just repeating what once felt safe? These are not easy questions. Most people do not look for them directly. They appear when life starts to feel different inside, even if everything outside looks the same. And here is something important to understand. This is not about you waiting. This is not about you pausing your life for someone else's realization. This is not about your healing being dependent on another person's awareness. That is not what this is. What matters is something deeper. Your healing cannot be built around someone else's timing. Your growth cannot stay locked in the rhythm of another person's process. The version of you that is emerging right now, the version that is slowly becoming more aware, more grounded, more connected to herself, cannot fully come forward if your energy is still tied to waiting. Not waiting in an obvious way, but waiting emotionally, waiting internally. That subtle space where part of you is still looking back while trying to move forward. And that split attention is what keeps things feeling heavy. Stay with this for a moment, because this is where things start to shift. You are not meant to remain in that in-between space forever. The part of you that is growing is asking for full presence, not half attention, not divided energy, full presence. And that does not mean forgetting. It does not mean erasing what mattered. It means placing your own life at the center again. Because right now, something inside you is trying to reorganize itself. Your understanding of love is changing. Your understanding of effort is changing. Your understanding of what you can carry emotionally is changing. And that kind of change does not always feel peaceful at first. It often feels uncomfortable. It often feels uncertain, because you are no longer fully who you were, but you are not yet fully who you are becoming. And that space in between can feel like delay when it is actually transition. And now, I want to speak to the part of you that feels fear, not the strong part. That part has already been doing its job. It has helped you hold things together when everything felt uncertain. It has helped you survive moments you thought you could not get through. It has carried you through emotional weight that no one else could see. But there is another part of you that deserves attention too, the quieter part, the part that shows up late at night when everything is still, the part that wonders if you have waited too long, the part that questions whether you gave too much of yourself to something that could not hold it. The part that sometimes fears your depth is the reason you have felt pain. The part that wonders if loving fully was a mistake. And I need you to hear this clearly. You did not make a mistake by feeling deeply. You did not make a mistake by caring fully. You did not make a mistake by hoping honestly. That was never the problem. The problem would only begin if you started seeing your depth as something wrong. Because your capacity to feel is not a flaw. It is not something to reduce. It is not something to hide. It is one of the most real parts of who you are. And the right kind of connection does not fear that depth. It does not ask you to shrink it. It does not ask you to control it or dilute it. It meets you there. It understands it. It recognizes it as something genuine, not something to fix. And before this message ends, I want to leave you with something simple, something that may stay with you longer than the rest. You are standing at a threshold right now, not at an ending. Even if it has felt like a series of emotional endings, this is not the end. It is a crossing point, a transition between what was and what is forming next. And crossing it does not always feel dramatic. It often feels subtle. A shift in how you breathe. A small moment of calm where there used to be tension. A quiet realization that something inside you is no longer the same. And then slowly, without force, without announcement, without urgency, your life begins to align in a new way. Not all at once, not perfectly, but steadily. And one day you will look back at what once felt like a stuck place and realize you were not stuck at all. You were moving through it the entire time. And somehow you made it through. And continue. The things you did when nobody was there to witness them still carried meaning. Every quiet decision you made when there was no reward waiting, no one clapping, no one confirming you were doing the right thing. Just you, alone with your thoughts, choosing to keep going anyway. That matters more than you realize, because those moments were not empty. They were not disappearing into nothing. They were slowly building something inside you that cannot be seen immediately. Something stable, something forming in silence. And even now, as you are trying to understand where all of this is leading, it is already shaping you in ways you will only recognize later. Growth rarely announces itself while it is happening. It feels unclear while you are inside it. It feels like waiting. It feels like standing still. But underneath that feeling, something is actively changing. Something is becoming stronger in you, even if it does not feel that way yet. And that is why this moment matters more than it seems. Because you did not give up when it would have been easier to do so. You did not abandon yourself when things became heavy. You stayed in the process, even when you did not fully understand it. Keep this with you, because it is not small, it is not accidental. It is part of what is preparing you for what comes next. Stay here for a moment, because what you think is delay might actually be development. And there is something else you need to understand about the person who has been living in your thoughts. Not in a dramatic or exaggerated way, but in that quiet space that returns without permission. The memory that appears in random seconds of your day. The name that surfaces when your mind is not even trying to think about it. What you experienced with them did not disappear just because distance happened. It left an imprint, and that imprint does not stay still. It continues to exist within them in ways they do not fully control or fully understand. Not as constant awareness, not as something they openly face every moment, but as something that quietly influences reflection. The absence between you did not erase meaning. It created space. And in that space, thoughts form differently. Questions appear in softer moments. Moments when life slows down and there is nothing to distract from inner truth. And even if they do not speak it, even if they do not show it, something in them has shifted because of what was real between you. But you must understand this clearly. This is not about you waiting. This is not about you holding your life in pause. This is not about your future depending on someone else's realization. That is not what this is. Your life is not meant to orbit around someone else's clarity. Your healing is not meant to be delayed by another person's process. What matters right now is what is happening inside you. The slow rebuilding, the quiet strength you are developing, the way you are starting to see yourself differently, even if only in small moments. That is where your attention belongs. Because something inside you is reorganizing, not loudly, not suddenly, but steadily. You are beginning to understand what you can no longer accept, what you no longer want to repeat, what you are no longer willing to carry just to keep things familiar. And that awareness changes everything over time. It changes how you choose, it changes how you love, it changes how you respond, and it changes what you allow into your life.